Chapter 13. First, about Murgatroyd. In his office in the Hill, Roderick Kinnison spoke aloud to the First Lensman. "What do you think should be done about him?" "Murgatroyd. Samms inhaled a mouthful of smoke and exhaled it slowly, watched it dissipate in the air. "Ah, yes, Murgatroyd." He repeated the performance. "My thought at the moment is to let him alone." "Check," Kinnison said. If Samms was surprised at his friend's concurrence, he did not show it. "Why? Let's see if we check on that." "Because he does not seem to be of fundamental importance, even if we could find him. And by the way, what do you think the chance is of our spies finding him?" "Just about the same chance that theirs have of finding out about the Samms Olmsted switch or our planet Bennett. Vanishingly small. 0. "Right. And even if we could find him, even find their secret base, which is certainly as well hidden as ours is, it would do us no present good, because we could take no positive action. We have, I think, learned the prime fact, that Town is actually Murgatroyd's superior." "That's the way I see it. We can almost draw an organization chart now." "I wouldn't say almost." Sam smiled half-ruefully. "There are gaping holes, and Isaacson is as yet a highly unknown quantity. I've tried to draw one a dozen times, but we haven't got enough information. An incorrect chart, would be worse than none at all. As soon as I can draw a correct one, I'll show it to you. But in the meantime, the position of our friend James F. Town is now clear. He is actually a big shot in both piracy and politics. That fact surprised me, even though it did clarify the picture tremendously." "Me too. One good thing, we won't have to hunt for him. You've been working on him right along, though, haven't you?" "Yes. But this new relationship throws light on a good many details which have been obscure. It also tends to strengthen our working hypothesis as to Isaacson, which we can't prove yet, of course, that he is the actual working head of the drug syndicate. Vice president in charge of drugs, so to speak." "Huh? That's a new one on me. I don't see it." "There is very little doubt that at the top there is Morgan. He is, and has been for some time, the real boss of North America. Under him, probably taking orders direct, is President Witherspoon." "Undoubtedly. The Nationalist Party is strictly a la machine, and Witherspoon is one of the world's slimiest skinkers. Morgan is chief engineer of the machine. Take it from there." "We know that Boss Jim is also in the top echelon, quite possibly the commander-in-chief of the enemy's armed forces. By analogy, and since Isaacson is apparently on the same level as Town, immediately below Morgan, wouldn't there be 3? Witherspoon? I doubt it. My present idea is that Witherspoon is at least one level lower. Comparatively small fry." "Could be. I'll buy it. A nice picture, Virg, and beautifully symmetrical. His Mightiness Morgan, Secretary of War Town, and Secretary of Drugs Isaacson, and each of them putting a heavy shoulder behind the political bandwagon. Very nice. That makes Operation Matisse tougher than ever, a triple distilled toughie. Glad I told you it wasn't my dish. Saves me the trouble of backing out now." "Yes, I have noticed how prone you are to duck tough jobs." Sam smiled quietly. "However, unless I am even more mistaken than usual, you will be in it up to your not-so-small ears, my friend, before it is over." "Huh? How?" Kinnison demanded. "That will, I hope, become clear very shortly." Sam stubbed out the butt of his cigarette and lit another. "The basic problem can be stated very simply. How are we going to persuade the sovereign countries of Earth, particularly the North American continent, to grant the Galactic Patrol the tremendous power and authority it will have to have?" Nice phrasing, Virg, and studied. Not off the cuff. But aren't you overdrawing a bit? Little, if any, conflict. The patrol would be pretty largely intersystemic in scope, with, of course, the necessary interplanetary and intercontinental and, Exactly. But it's logical enough, Virg, even at that, and has plenty of precedents, clear back to ancient history. Way back, before space travel, when they first started to use atomic energy, and the only drugs they had to worry about were cocaine, morphine, heroin, and other purely Tellurian products. I was reading about it just the other day. Kinnison swung around, fingered a book out of a matched set, and riffled its leaves. Russia was the world's problem child then. Put up what they called an iron curtain. Wouldn't play with the neighbor's children, but picked up her marbles and went home. But yet, here it is. Original source unknown. Some indications point to a report of somebody named Hoover, sometime in the 1940s or 50s, Gregorian calendar. Listen, this protocol, he's talking about the Agreement on Worldwide Narcotics Control, was signed by 52 nations, including the USSR, that was Russia, and its satellite states. It was the only international agreement to which the communist countries, you know more about what communism was, I suppose, than I do, just that it was another form of dictatorship that didn't work out, to which the communist countries ever gave more than lip service. This adherence is all the more surprising, in view of the political situation then obtaining, in that all signatory nations obligated themselves to surrender national sovereignty in 5 highly significant respects, as follows. First, to permit narcotics agents of all other signatory nations free, secret, and unregistered entry into, unrestricted travel throughout, and exit from all their lands and waters wherever situate. Second, upon request, to allow known criminals and known contraband to enter and to leave their territories without interference. Third, to cooperate fully and as a secondary and not as a prime mover in any narcotics patrol program set up by any other signatory nation. Fourth, upon request, to maintain complete secrecy concerning any narcotics operation. And fifth, to keep the Central Narcotics Authority fully and continuously informed upon all matters hereinbefore specified. And apparently, Virg, it worked. If they could do that way back then, we certainly should be able to make the patrol work now. You talk as though the situations were comparable. They aren't. Instead of giving up an insignificant fraction of their national sovereignty, all nations will have to give up practically all of it. They will have to change their thinking from a national to a galactic viewpoint. We'll have to become units in a galactic civilization, just as counties used to be units of states, and states are units of the continents. The Galactic Patrol will not be able to stop at being the supreme and only authority in intersystemic affairs. It is bound to become intrasystemic, intraplanetary, and intracontinental. Eventually, it must and it shall be the sole authority, except for such purely local organizations as city police. What a program! Kinnison thought silently for minutes. But I'm still betting that you can bring it off. We'll keep on driving until we do. What gives us our chance is that the All-Lensman Solarian Council is already in existence and is functioning smoothly, and that the government of North America has no jurisdiction beyond the boundaries of its continent. Thus, and even though Morgan has extra-legal powers both as boss of North America and as the head of an organization which is in fact intersystemic in scope, he can do nothing whatever about the fact that the Solarian Council has been enlarged into the Galactic Council. As a matter of fact, he was and is very much in favor of that particular move, just as much so as we are. You're going too fast for me. How do you figure that? Unlike our idea of the patrol as a coordinator of free and independent races, Morgan sees it as the perfect instrument of a galactic dictatorship. Thus, North America is the most powerful continent of Earth. The other continents will follow her lead, or else. Tellus can very easily dominate the other Solarian planets, and the solar system can maintain dominance over all other systems as they are discovered and colonized. Therefore, whoever controls the North American continent controls all space. I see. Could be at that. Throw the Lensman out, put his own stooges in. Wonder how he'll go about it. A tour de force? No. The next election would be my guess. If so, that will be the most important election in history. If they decide to wait for the election, yes. I'm not as sure as you seem to be that they will not act sooner. They can't, Kinnison declared. Name me one thing they think they can do, and I'll shoot it fuller of holes than a target. They can, and I am very much afraid that they will, Samms replied soberly. At any time he cares to do so, Morgan, through the North American government, of course, can abrogate the treaty and name his own council. Without my boys, the backbone and the guts of North America, as well as of the patrol, don't be stupid, Virg, they're loyal. Admit it, but at the same time they are being paid in North American currency. Of course, we will soon have our own galactic credit system worked out, but what the hell difference would that make? Kinnison wanted savagely to know. You think they'd last until the next payday if they start playing that kind of ball? What in the hell do you think I'd be doing? And Clayton and Schweikert and the rest of the gang, sitting on our fat rumps and crying into our beers? You would do nothing. I could not permit any illegal— Permit! Kinnison blazed, leaping to his feet. Permit? Hell! Are you loose-screwed enough to actually think I would ask or need your permission? Listen, Samms. The Port Admiral's voice took on a quality like nothing his friend had ever before heard. The first thing I would do would be to take off your lens, wrap you up, especially your mouth, in 17 yards of 3-inch adhesive tape and heave you into the brig. The second would be to call out everything we've got, including every half-built ship on Bennett able to fly, and declare martial law. The third would be a series of summary executions, starting with Morgan and working down. And if he's got any fraction of the brain I credit him with, Morgan knows damn well exactly what would happen. Oh. Samms, while very much taken aback, was thrilled to the center of his being. I had not considered anything so drastic, but you probably would. Not probably, Kinnison corrected him grimly. Certainly. And Morgan does know, except about Bennett, of course, and he would not, for obvious reasons, bring in his secret armed forces. You're right, Rod. It will be the election. Definitely. And it's plain enough what their basic strategy will be. Kinnison, completely mollified, sat down and lit another cigar. His Nationalist Party is now in power, but it was our cosmocrats of the previous administration who so basely slipped one over on the dear people, who betrayed the entire North American continent into the claws of rapacious wealth, no less, by ratifying that unlawful, unhallowed, unconstitutional, and so on treaty. Scoundrels, bribe-takers, betrayers of a sacred trust. How rabble-rouser Morgan will thump the tub on that theme. He'll make the welkin ring as it never rang before. Kinnison mimicked savagely the demagogue's round and purple tones as he went on. Since they have no mandate from the people to trade their birthright for a mess of pottage, that nefarious and underhanded treaty is, a prima vista and ipso facto and a priori, completely and necessarily and positively null and void. People of Earth, arouse, arise, rise in your might, and throw off this stultifying and degrading, this paralyzing yoke of the moneyed powers. Throw out this dictatorial, autocratic, wealth-directed, illegal, monstrous council of so-called Lensmen. Rise in your might at the polls. Elect a council of your own choosing, not of Lensmen, but of ordinary folks like you and me. Throw off this hellish yoke, I say. And here he begins to positively froth at the mouth. So that the government of the people, by the people, and for the people shall not perish from the earth. He has used that exact peroration, ancient as it is, so many times that practically everybody thinks he originated it, and it's always good for so many decibels of applause that he'll keep on using it forever. Your analysis is vivid, cogent, and factual, Rod, but the situation is not at all funny. Did I act as though I thought it was? If so, I'm a damned poor actor. I'd like to kick the blood-sucking leech all the way from here to the great nebula in Andromeda, and if I ever get the chance, I'm going to. An interesting, but somewhat irrelevant idea. Sam smiled at his friend's passionate outburst. But go on. I agree with you in principle so far, and your viewpoint is, to say the least, refreshing. Well, Morgan will have so hypnotized most of the dear people that they will think it their own idea when he renominates this spineless nincompoop Witherspoon for another term as President of North America, with a solid machine-made slate of hatchetmen behind him. They win the election. Then the government of the North American continent, not the Morgantown-Isaacson machine, but all nice and legal and by mandate and in strict accordance with the party platform, abrogates the treaty and names its own council. And right then, my friend, the boys and I will do our stuff. Except that, in such a case, you wouldn't. Think it over, Rod. Why not? Kinnison demanded, in a voice which, however, did not carry much conviction. Because we would be in the wrong, and we are even less able to go against united public opinion than is the Morgan crowd. We do something. I've got it. Kinnison banged the desk with his fist. That would be a strictly unilateral action. North America would be standing alone. Of course. So, we'll pull all the cosmocrats and all of our friends out of North America, move them to Bennett or somewhere, and make Morgan and Company a present of it. We won't declare martial law or kill anybody unless they decide to call in their reserves. We'll merely isolate the whole damn continent, throw a screen around it and over it that a microbe won't be able to get through, one that would make that Iron Curtain I read about look like a bride's veil, and we'll keep them isolated until they beg to join up on our terms. Strictly legal and the perfect solution. How about me giving the boys a briefing on it right now? Not yet. Sam's mien, however, lightened markedly. I never thought of that way out. It could be done, and it would probably work, but I would not recommend it except as an ultimately last resort. It has at least two tremendous drawbacks. I know it, but it would wreck North America as no nation has ever been wrecked, quite possibly beyond recovery. Furthermore, how many people, including yourself and your children, would like to renounce their North American citizenship and remove themselves, permanently and irrevocably, from North American soil? Put that away. It doesn't sound so good, does it? But what the hell else can we do? Just what we have been planning on doing. We must win the election. Huh? Kinnison's mouth almost fell open. You say it easy. How? With whom? By what stretch of the imagination do you figure that you can find anybody with a loose enough mouth to outlie and outpromise Morgan? And can you duplicate his machine? We can not only duplicate his machine, we can better it. The truth, presented to the people in language they can understand and appreciate, by a man whom they like, admire, and respect, will be more attractive than Morgan's promises. The same truth will dispose of Morgan's lies. Well, go on. You've answered my questions, after a fashion, except the stinger. Does the Council think it's got a man with enough dinage to lift the load? Unanimously. They also agreed unanimously that we have only one. Haven't you any idea who he is? Not a glimmering of one. Kinnison frowned in thought, then his face cleared into a broad grin, and he yelled, What a damn fool I am! You, of course! Wrong. I was not even seriously considered. It was the consensus that I could not possibly win. My work has been such as to keep me out of the public eye. If the man in the street thinks of me at all, he thinks that I hold myself apart and above him, the ivory tower concept. Could be at that. But you've got my curiosity aroused. How can a man of that caliber have been kicking around so long without me knowing anything about him? You do. That's what I've been working around to all afternoon. You. Huh? Kinnison gasped as though he had received a blow in the solar plexus. Me? Me? Hell's brazen hinges! Exactly. You. Silencing Kinnison's inarticulate protests, Samms went on, "First, you'll have no difficulty in talking to an audience as you've just talked to me." "Of course not. But did I use any language that would burn out the transmitters? I don't remember whether I did or not." "I don't either. You probably did, but that would be nothing new. Telenews has never yet cut you off the ether because of it. The point is this. While you do not realize it, you are a better tub-thumper and welcome-ringer than Morgan is, when something, such as just now, really gets you going. And as for a machine, what finer one is possible than the patrol? Everybody in it or connected with it will support you to the hilt. You know that." "Why, I suppose so. Probably they would, yes." "Do you know why?" "Can't say that I do, unless it's because I treat them fair, so they do the same to me." "Exactly. I don't say that everybody likes you, but I don't know of anybody who doesn't respect you. And most important, everybody, all over space, knows Rod the Rock Kinnison, and why he is called that." "But that very man-on-horseback thing may backfire on you, Virg." "Perhaps, slightly, but we're not afraid of that. And finally, you said you'd like to kick Morgan from here to Andromeda. How would you like to kick him from Panama City to the North Pole?" "I said it, and I wasn't just warming up my jets either. I'd like it." The big lensman's nostrils flared, his lips thinned. "By God, Virg, I will." "Thanks, Rod." With no display whatever of the emotion he felt, Sam skipped deliberately to the matter next in hand. "Now, about Iridan. Let's see if they know anything yet." The report of Konobos and Dalnalton was terse and exact. They had found, and that finding, so baldly put, could have filled and should fill a book, that Spaceways uranium vessels were, beyond any reasonable doubt, hauling thionite from Iridan to the planets of Sol. Spy rays being useless, they had considered the advisability of investigating Iridan in person, but had decided against such action. Iridan was closely held by Uranium Incorporated. Its population was 100% Tellurian human. Neither Dalnalton nor Konobos could disguise himself well enough to work there. Either would be caught promptly, and as promptly shot. "Thanks, fellows," Sam said, when it became evident that the brief report was done. Then to Kinnison, "That puts it up to Conway Costigan. And Jack, or Mace, or both?" "Both," Kinnison decided. "And anybody else they can use." "I'll get them at it." Sam sent out his thoughts. "And now, I wonder what that daughter of mine is doing. I'm a little worried about her, Rod. She's too cocky for her own good, or strength. Some of these days, she's going to bite off more than she can chew, if she hasn't already. The more we learn about Morgan, the less I like the idea of her working on Herkimer III. I've told her so a dozen times, and why, but of course it didn't do any good." "It wouldn't. The only way to develop teeth is to bite with 'em. You had to, so did I. Our kids have got to, too. We lived through it, so will they. As for Herky III," he thought for moments, then went on, "check. But she's done a job so far that nobody else could do. In spite of that fact, if it wasn't for our lenses, I'd say to pull her, if you have to heave the insubordinate young jade into the brig. But with the lenses, and the way you watch her, to say nothing of Mace Northrop, and he's a lot of man, I can't see her getting in either very bad or very deep. Can you?" "No, I can't," Samms admitted, but the thoughtful frown did not leave his face. He lensed her, finding, as he had supposed, that she was at a party. dancing, as he had feared, with Senator Morgan's #1 secretary. "Hi, Dad," she greeted him gaily, with no slightest change in the expression of the face turned so engagingly to her partner's. "I have the honor of reporting that all instruments are still dead centering the green." "And have you, by any chance, been paying any attention to what I have been telling you?" "Oh, lots," she assured him. "I've collected reams of data. He could be almost as much of a menace as he thinks he is, in some cases, but I haven't begun to slip yet. As I have told you all along, this is just a game, and we're both playing it strictly according to the rules." "That's good. Keep it that way, my dear." Sam signed off, and his daughter returned her full attention, never noticeably absent, to the handsome secretary. The evening wore on. Miss Samms danced every dance, occasionally with one or another of the notables present, but usually with Herkimer third. "A drink?" he asked. "A small, cold one?" "Not so small, and very cold," she agreed enthusiastically. Glass in hand, Herkimer indicated a nearby doorway. "I just heard that our host has acquired a very old and very fine bronze, a Neptune. We should run an eye over it, don't you think?" "By all means," she agreed again. But as they passed through the shadowed portal, the man's head perked to the right. "There's something you really ought to see, Jill," he exclaimed. "Look!" She looked. A young woman of her own height and build, and with her own flamboyant hair, identical as to hairdo and as to every fine detail of dress and of ornamentation, glass in hand, was strolling back into the ballroom. Jill started to protest, but could not. In the brief moment of inaction, the beam of a snub-nosed pea-gun had played along her spine from hips to neck. She did not fall. He had given her a very mild jolt, but, rage as she would, she could neither struggle nor scream. And, after the fact, she knew. But he couldn't possibly. Nevian paralysis guns were as outlawed as was V2 gas itself. Nevertheless, he had. And on the instant, a woman dressed in crisp and spotless white and carrying a hooded cloak appeared, and Herkimer now wore a beard and heavy, horn-rimmed spectacles. Thus, very shortly, Virgilia Samms found herself completely helpless and completely unrecognizable, walking awkwardly out of the house between a business-like doctor and a solicitous nurse. "Will you need me any more, Dr. Murray?" The woman carefully and expertly loaded the patient into the rear seat of a car. "Thank you, no, Miss Childs." With a sick, cold certainty, Jill knew that this conversation was for the benefit of the doorman and the hackers, and that it would stand up under any examination. "Miss Harmon's condition is, well, nothing at all serious." The car moved out into the street, and Jill, really frightened for the first time in her triumphant life, fought down an almost overwhelming wave of panic. The hood had slipped down over her eyes, blinding her. She could not move a single voluntary muscle. Nevertheless, she knew that the car traveled a few blocks, 6, she thought, west on Bolton Street, before turning left. Why didn't somebody lens her? Her father wouldn't, she knew, until tomorrow. Neither of the Kinnisons would, nor Spud. They never did, except on direct invitation. But Mace would, before he went to bed. Or would he? It was past his bedtime now, and she had been pretty caustic, only last night, because she was doing a particularly delicate bit of reading. But he would. He must. "Mace! Mace! Mace!" And eventually Mace did. Deep under the hill, Roderick Kinnison swore fulminantly at the sheer physical impossibility of getting out of that furiously radiating mountain in a hurry. At New York Spaceport, however, Mason Northrop and Jack Kinnison not only could hurry, but did. "Where are you, Jill?" Northrop demanded presently. "What kind of a car are you in?" "Quite near Stanhope Circle." In communication with her friends at last, Jill regained a measure of her usual poise. "Within 8 or 10 blocks, I'm sure. I'm in a black Wilford sedan, last year's model. I didn't get a chance to see its license plates." "That helps a lot," Jack grunted savagely. 10-block radius covers a hell of a lot of territory, and half the cars in town are black Wilford sedans. Shut up, Jack. Go ahead, Jill. Tell us all you can, and keep on sending us anything that will help at all. I kept the right and left turns and distances straight for quite a while, about 20 blocks. That's how I know it was Stanhope Circle. I don't know how many times he went around the circle, though, or which way he went when he left it. After leaving the circle, the traffic was very light, and here there doesn't seem to be any traffic at all. That brings us up to date. You'll know as well as I do what happens next. With Jill, the lensman knew that Herkimer drove his car up to the curb and stopped, parked without backing up. He got out and hauled the girl's limp body out of the car, displacing the hood enough to free one eye. Good. Only one other car was visible. A bright yellow convertible parked across the street, about half a block ahead. There was a sign. No parking on this side, 7 to 10. The building toward which he was carrying her was more than 3 stories high, and had a number, 1-4, if he would only swing her a little bit more so that she could see the rest of it. 1479. Rushton Boulevard, you think, Mace? Could be. 1479 would be on the downtown traffic side. Blast. Into the building, where 2 masked men locked and barred the door behind them. And keep it locked, Herkimer ordered. You know what to do until I come back down. Into an elevator and up, through massive double doors into a room, whose most conspicuous item of furniture was a heavy steel chair bolted to the floor. 2 masked men got up and placed themselves behind that chair. Jill's strength was coming back fast, but not fast enough. The cloak was removed. Her ankles were tied firmly, one to each front leg of the chair. Herkimer threw 4 turns of rope around her torso and the chair's back, took up every inch of slack, and tied a workmanlike knot. Then, still without a word, he stood back and lighted a cigarette. The last trace of paralysis disappeared, but the girl's mad struggles, futile as they were not allowed to continue. Put a double hammerlock on her, Herkimer directed. But be damn sure not to break anything at this stage of the game. That comes later. Jill, more furiously angry than frightened until now, locked her teeth to keep from screaming as the pressure went on. She could not bend forward to relieve the pain. She could not move. She could only grit her teeth and glare. She was beginning to realize, however, what was actually in store. That Herkimer III was in fact a monster whose like she had never known. He stepped quietly forward, gathered up a handful of fabric, and heaved. The strapless and backless garment, in no way designed to withstand such stresses, parted, squarely across at the upper strand of rope. He puffed his cigarette to a vivid coal, took it in his fingers. There was an audible hiss and a tiny stink of burning flesh as the glowing ember was extinguished in the clear, clean skin below the girl's left armpit. Jill flinched then and shrieked desperately, but her tormentor was viciously unmoved. That was just to settle any doubt as to whether or not I mean business. I'm all done fooling around with you. I want to know 2 things. First, everything you know about the lens, where it comes from, what it really is, and what it does besides what your press agents advertise. Second, what really happened at the ambassador's ball. Start talking. The faster you talk, the less you'll get hurt. You can't get away with this, Herkimer. Jill tried desperately to pull her shattered nerves together. I'll be missed, traced. She paused, gasping. If she told him that the lensmen were in full and continuous communication with her, and if he believed it, he would kill her right then. She switched instantly to another track. That double isn't good enough to fool anybody who really knows me. She doesn't have to be. The man grinned venomously. Nobody who knows you will get close enough to her to tell the difference. This wasn't done on the spur of the moment, Jill. It was planned, minutely. You haven't got the chance of the proverbial celluloid dog in hell. Jill, Jack Kinnison's thought stabbed in. It isn't Rushton. 1479 is a 2-story. What other streets could it be? I don't know. She was not in very good shape to think. Damnation! Got to get hold of somebody who knows the streets. Spud, grab a hacker at the Circle, and I'll lens Parker. Jack's thoughts snapped off as he tuned to a local lensman. Jill's heart sank. She was starkly certain now that the lensman could not find her in time. Tighten up a little, Eddie. You too, Bob. Stop it. Oh, God, stop it! The unbearable agony relaxed a little. She watched in horrified fascination a second glowing coal approach her bare right side. Even if I do talk, you'll kill me anyway. You couldn't let me go now. Kill you, my pet? Not if you behave yourself. We've got a lot of planets the Patrol never heard of, and you could keep a man interested for quite a while if you really tried. And if you beg hard enough, maybe I'll let you try. However, I'd get just as much fun out of killing you as out of the other, so it's up to you. Not sudden death, of course. Little things at first, like we've been doing. A few more touches of warmth here and there. So. Scream as much as you please. I enjoy it, and this room is soundproof. Once more, boys, about half an inch higher this time. Up, steady, down. We'll have half an hour or so of this stuff. Herkimer knew that to the quivering, sensitive, highly imaginative girl, his words would be practically as punishing as the atrocious actualities themselves. Then I'll do things to your fingernails and toenails, beginning with burning slivers of double-base flare powder and working up. Then your eyes. Or no, I'll save them until last, so you can watch a couple of Venerian slasher worms work on you, one on each leg, and a Martian digger on your bare belly. Gripping her hair firmly in his left hand, he forced her head back and down almost to her hard-held hands. His right hand, concealing something which he had not mentioned, and which was probably starkly unmentionable, approached her taut-stretched throat. Talk or not, just as you please. The voice was utterly callous, as chill as the death she now knew he was so willing to deal. But listen, if you elect to talk, tell the truth. You won't lie twice. I'll count to 10. 1. Jill uttered a gurgling, strangling noise, and he lifted her head a trifle. Can you talk now? Yes. 2. Helpless, immobile, scared now to a depth of terror she had never imagined it possible to feel, Jill fought her wrenched and shaken mind back from insanity's very edge, managed with a pale tongue to lick bloodless lips. Pops Kinnison always said a man could die only once, but he didn't know. In battle, yes, perhaps. But she had already died a dozen times. But she'd keep on dying forever before she'd say a word. But, tell him, Jill. Northrup's thought beat at her mind. He, her lover, was unashamedly frantic, as much with sheer rage as with sympathy for her physical and mental anguish. For the 19th time, I say, tell him. We've just located you, Hancock Avenue. We'll be there in 2 minutes. Yes, Jill, quit being a damned stubborn jackass and tell him. Jack Kinnison's thought bit deep, but this time, strangely enough, the girl felt no repugnance at his touch. There was nothing whatever of the lover, nor of the brother, except of the fraternity of arms. She belonged. She would come out of this brawl right side up, or none of them would. Tell the goddamn rat the truth, Jack's thought drove on. It won't make any difference. He won't live long enough to pass it on. But I can't. I won't, Jill stormed. Why, Pops Kinnison would. Not this time, I wouldn't, Jill. Sam's thought tried to come in too, but the Port Admiral's vehemence was overwhelming. No harm. He's doing this strictly on his own. If Morgan had had any idea, he'd have killed him first. Start talking, or I'll spank you to a rosy blister. They were to laugh later at the incongruity of that threat, but it did produce results. 9. Herkimer grinned wolfishly in sadistic anticipation. "Stop it! I'll tell!" she screamed. "Stop it! Take that thing away! I can't stand it! I'll tell!" She burst into racking, tearing sobs. "Steady." Herkimer put something in his pocket, then slapped her so viciously that fingers-long marks sprang into red relief upon the chalk-white background of her cheek. "Don't crack up. I haven't started to work on you yet. What about that lens?" She gulped twice before she could speak. "It comes from Arisia. I haven't got one myself, so I don't know very much about it at first hand. But from what the boys tell me, it must be—" Outside the building, 3 black forms arrowed downward. Northrop and young Kinnison stopped at the 6th level. Costigan went on down to take care of the guards. "Bullets, not beams," the Irishman reminded his younger fellows. "We'll have to clean up the mess without leaving a trace, so don't do any more damage to the property than you absolutely have to." Neither made any reply. They were both too busy. The 2 thugs standing behind the steel chair, being armed openly, went first. Then Jack put a bullet through Herkimer's head. But Northrop was not content with that. He slid the pin to full automatic, and 10 more heavy slugs tore into the falling body before it struck the floor. 3 quick slashes, and the girl was free. "Jill! Mace!" Locked in each other's arms, straining together, no bystander would have believed that this was their first kiss. It was plainly, yes, quite spectacularly, evident, however, that it would not be their last. Jack, blushing furiously, picked up the cloak and flung it at the oblivious couple. "Psst! Psst! Jill! Wrap 'em up!" he whispered urgently. "All the top brass in space is coming at full emergency blast. There'll be scrambled eggs all over the place any second now. Mace! Damn your thick, hard skull! Snap out of it! He's always frothing at the mouth about her running around half naked, and if he sees her like this, especially with you, he'll simply have a litter of lizards. You'll get 1,000,000 black spots and 700 years in the clink. That's better. Bye now. I'll see you up at New York Spaceport." Jack Kinnison dashed to the nearest window, threw it open, and dived headlong out of the building. Chapter 14. The employment office of any concern with personnel running into the hundreds of thousands is a busy place indeed, even when its plants are all on Tellus, and its working conditions are as nearly ideal as such things can be made. When that firm's business is colonial, however, and its working conditions are only a couple of degrees removed from slavery, procurement of personnel is a first-magnitude problem. The personnel department, like Alice in Wonderland, must run as fast as it can in order to stay where it is. Thus, the help-wanted advertisements of Uranium Incorporated covered the planet Earth with blandishment and guile. And thus, for 12 hours of every day and for 7 days of every week, the employment offices of Uranium Inc. were filled with men, mostly the scum of Earth. There were, of course, exceptions, one of which strode through the motley group of waiting men and thrust a card through the information wicket. He was a chunky-looking individual, appearing shorter than his actual 5 feet 9 because of 190 pounds of weight, even though every pound was placed exactly where it would do the most good. He looked, well, slouchy, and his mien was sullen. "Birkenfeld, by appointment," he growled through the wicket in a voice which could have been pleasantly deep. The coolly efficient blonde manipulated plugs. "Mr. George W. Jones, sir, by appointment." "Thank you, sir," and Mr. Jones was escorted into Mr. Birkenfeld's private office. "Have a chair, please, Mr. Jones." "So, you know." "Yes. It is seldom that a man of your education, training, and demonstrated ability applies to us for employment of his own initiative, and a very thorough investigation is indicated." "What am I here for, then?" the visitor demanded truculently. "You could have turned me down by mail. Everybody else has, since I got out." "You are here because We who operate on the frontiers cannot afford to pass judgment upon a man because of his past, unless that past precludes the probability of a useful future. Yours does not, and in some cases, such as yours, we are very deeply interested in the future." The official's eyes drilled deep. Conway Costigan had never been in the limelight. On the contrary, he had made inconspicuousness a passion and an art. Even in such scenes of violence as that which had occurred at the ambassador's ball, he managed to remain unnoticed. His lens had never been visible. No one except Lensman and Cleo and Jill knew that he had one, and Lensman and Cleo and Jill did not talk. Although he was calmly certain that this Birkenfeld was not an ordinary interviewer, he was equally certain that the investigators of Uranium Inc. had found out exactly and only what the patrol had wanted them to find. "So?" Joan's bearing altered subtly, and not because of the penetrant eyes. "That's all I want, a chance. I'll start at the bottom, as far down as you say." We advertise, and truthfully, that opportunity on Iridian is unlimited. Birkenfeld chose his words with care. In your case, opportunity would be either absolutely unlimited or zero, depending entirely upon yourself. "I see." Dumbness had not been included in the fictitious Mr. Jones' background. "You don't need to draw a blueprint." "You'll do, I think." The interviewer nodded in approval. "Nevertheless, I must make our position entirely clear. If the slip was, shall we say, accidental, you will go far with us. If you try to play false, you will not last long, and you will not be missed." "Fair enough." "Your willingness to start at the bottom is commendable, and it is a fact that those who come up through the ranks make the best executives, in our line at least. Just how far down are you willing to start?" "How low do you go?" "A mucker, I think, would be low enough, and from your build and obvious physical strength, the logical job." "Mucker?" "One who scoffers ore in the mine. Nor can we make any exception in your case as to the routines of induction and transportation." "Of course not." "Take this slip to Mr. Calkins in room 6217. He will run you through the mill." And that night, in an obscure boarding-house, Mr. George Washington Jones, after a meticulous service special survey in every direction, reached a large and somewhat grimy hand into a screened receptacle in his battered suitcase and touched a lens. Cleo, the lovely mother of their wonderful children, appeared in his mind. "Made it, sweetheart. No suspicion at all. No more lensing for a while. Not too long, I hope. So long, Cleo." "Take it easy, Spud, darling, and be careful." Her tone was light, but she could not conceal a stark background of fear. "Oh, I wish I could go too." "I wish you could, Tootie." The linked minds flashed back to what the two had done together in the red opacity of Nevian murk, on Nevia's mighty, watery globe. But that kind of thinking would not do. "But the boys will keep in touch with me and keep you posted. And besides, you know how hard it is to get a babysitter." It is strange that the fundamental operations of working metalliferous veins have changed so little throughout the ages. Or is it? Ores came into being with the crusts of the planets. They change appreciably only with the passage of geologic time. Ancient mines, of course, could not go down very deep or follow a seam very far. There was too much water and too little air. The steam engine helped, in degree if not in kind, by removing water and supplying air. Tools improved, from the simple metal bar through pick and shovel and candle, through drill and hammer and low explosive and acetylene, through Sullivan slugger and high explosive and electrics, through Scofer and rotary and Burley and sourceless glow, to the complex gadgetry of today. But what fundamentally is the difference? Men still crawl, snake-like, to where the metal is. Men still, by dint of sheer brawn, jackass the precious stuff up to where our vaunted automatics can get hold of it. And men still die, in horribly unknown fashions and in callously recorded numbers, in the mines which supply the stuff upon which our vaunted culture rests. But to resume the thread of narrative, George Washington Jones went to Arisia as a common laborer, a mucker. He floated down beside the skip. A skip is a mine elevator, some 4,800 feet. He rode an ore car a horizontal distance of approximately 8 miles to the brilliantly illuminated cavern, which was the station of the 12th and lowest level. He was assigned to the bunk in which he would sleep for the next 15 nights. 15 down and 3 up ran the standard underground contract. He walked 400 yards, yelled, "Nothing down!" and inched his way up a rise, in many places scarcely wider than his shoulders, to the stope some 300 feet above. He reported to the miner who was to be his immediate boss, and bent his back to the scoffer, which, while not resembling a shovel at all closely, still meant hard physical labor. He already knew ore, the glossy, submetallic, pitchy black luster of uraninite or pitchblende, the yellows of audenite and carnotite, the variant and confusing greens of tobernite. No values went from Jones' scoffer into the heavily timbered, steel-braced waste pockets of the stope. Very little base rock went down the rise. He became accustomed to the work, got used to breathing the peculiarly lifeless, dry, oily, compressed air. And when, after a few days, his stentorian "Nothing down" called forth a "Nothing but a little fine stuff," and a handful of grit and pebbles, he knew that he had been accepted into the undefined, unwritten, and unofficial, yet nevertheless intensely actual, fellowship of hard rock men. He belonged. He knew that he must abandon his policy of invisibility, and after several days of thought, he decided how he would do it. Hence, upon the first day of his up period, he joined his fellows in their descent upon one of the rawest, noisiest dives of Danapolis. The men were met, of course, by a bevy of giggling, shrieking, garishly painted, and strongly perfumed girls, and at this point young Jones' behavior became exceedingly unorthodox. "Buy me a drink, mister? And a dance, huh?" "On your way, sister." He brushed the importunate wench aside. "I get enough exercise underground, and you ain't got a thing I want." Apparently unaware that the girl was exchanging meaningful glances with a couple of husky characters labeled bouncer in bill-poster type, the atypical mucker strode up to the long and ornate bar. "Give me a bottle of pineapple pup," he ordered brusquely, "and a package of Tellurian cigarettes. Sunshines." Pine..." The surprised bartender did not finish the word. The bouncers were fast, but Costigan was faster. A hard knee took one in the solar plexus. A hard elbow took the other so savagely under the chin as to all but break his neck. A bartender started to swing a bung starter and found himself flying through the air toward a table. Men, table, and drinks crashed to the floor. "I pick my own company, and I drink what I damn please," Jones announced grittily. "Them lunkers ain't hurt none to speak of." His hard eyes swept the room malevolently. "But I ain't in no gentle mood, and the next jaspers that tackle me will wind up in the repair shop, or maybe in the morgue. See?" This, of course, was much too much. A dozen embattled roughnecks leapt to mop up on the misguided wight who had so impugned the manhood of all Arisia. Then, while 6 or 7 bartenders blew frantic blasts upon police whistles, there was a flurry of action too fast to be resolved into consecutive events by the eye. Conway Costigan, one of the fastest men with hands and feet the patrol has ever known, was trying to keep himself alive, and he succeeded. "What the hell goes on here?" a chorus of raucously authoritative voices yelled, and 16 policemen — John Law did not travel singly in that district, but in platoons — swinging clubs and saps, finally hauled George Washington Jones out from the bottom of the pile. He had sundry abrasions and not a few contusions, but no bones were broken, and his skin was practically whole. And since his version of the affair was not only inadequate, but also differed in important particulars from those of several non-participating witnesses, he spent the rest of his holiday in jail, a development with which he was quite content. The work and time went on. He became in rapid succession a head mucker, a miner's pimp, which short and rugged Anglo-Saxon word means simply helper in underground parlance, a miner, a top miner, and then, a long step up the ladder, a shift boss. And then disaster struck, suddenly, paralyzingly, as mine disasters do. Loudspeakers blared briefly. "Explosion! Cave-in! Flood! Fire! Gas! Radiation! Damp!" and expired. Short circuits. There was no way of telling which, if any, of those dire warnings were true. The power failed, and the lights. The hiss of air from valves, a noise which, by its constant and unvarying and universal presence, soon becomes unheard, became noticeable because of its diminution in volume and tone. And then, seconds later, a jarring, shuddering rumble was felt and heard, accompanied by the snapping of shattered timbers and the sharper, utterly unforgettable shriek of rending and riven steel. And the men, as men do under such conditions, went wild, yelling, swearing, leaping toward where, in the rayless dark, each thought the rise to be. It took a couple of seconds for the shift boss to break out and hook up his emergency battery lamp, and 3 or 4 more seconds, and by dint of fists, feet, and a 2-foot length of air hose, to restore any degree of order. 4 men were dead, but that wasn't too bad, considering. "Up there, under the hanging wall," he ordered sharply. "That won't fall, unless the whole mountain slips. Now, how many of you Jaspers have got your emergency kits on you? 12? Out of 26. What brains! Put on your masks. You without 'em can stay up here. You'll be safe for a while, I hope." Then, presently, "There, that's all for now, I guess." He flashed his light downward. The massive steel members no longer writhed. The crushed and tortured timbers were still. "That rise may be open. It goes through solid rock, not waste. I'll see. Right, you're all in one piece, aren't you?" "I guess so, yes." "Take charge up here. I'll go down to the drift. If the rise is open, I'll give you a flash. Send the ones with masks down, one at a time. Take a jolly bar and bash the brains out of anybody who gets panicky again." Jones was not as brave as he sounded. Mine disasters carry a terror which is uniquely and peculiarly poignant. Nevertheless, he went down the rise, found it open, and signaled. Then, after issuing brief orders, he led the way along the dark and silent drift toward the station, wondering profanely why the people on duty there had not done something with the wealth of emergency equipment always ready there. The party found some cave-ins, but nothing they could not dig through. The station was also silent and dark. Jones, flashing his headlamp upon the emergency panel, smashed the glass, wrenched the door open, and pushed buttons. Lights flashed on. Warning signals flared, bellowed, and rang. The rotary air pump began again its normal, subdued, whickering whir. But the water pump, shuddering, clanking, groaning, it was threatening to go out any second, but there wasn't a thing in the world Jones could do about it, yet. The station itself, so buttressed and pillared with alloy steel as to be little more compressible than an equal volume of solid rock, was unharmed, but in it nothing lived. 4 men and a woman, the nurse, were stiffly motionless at their posts. Apparently, the leads to the station had been blasted in such fashion that no warning whatever had been given, and smoke, billowing inward from the main tunnel, was growing thicker by the minute. Jones punched another button. A foot-thick barrier of asbestos, tungsten, and vitrified refractory slid smoothly across the tunnel's opening. He considered briefly, pityingly, those who might be outside, but felt no urge to explore. If any lived, there were buttons on the other side of the fire door. The eddying smoke disappeared. The flaring lights winked out. Air horns and bells relapsed into silence. The shift boss, now apparently the superintendent of the whole 12th level, removed his mask, found the station walkie-talkie, and snapped a switch. He spoke, listened, spoke again, then called a list of names, none of which brought any response. "Right, and you 5 others," picking out miners who could be depended upon to keep their heads. "Take these guns. Shoot if you have to, but not unless you have to. Have the muckers clear the drift. just enough to get through. You'll find a shift boss with a crew of 19 up in Stope 60. Their rise is blocked. They've got light and power again now, and good air, and they're working on it, but opening the rise from the top is a damn slow job. Right, you throw a chippy into it from the bottom. You others work back along the drift clear to the last glory hole. Be sure that all the rises are open. Check all the stopes and glory holes. Tell everybody you find alive to report to me here." "Oh, what good?" a man shrieked. "We're all goners anyway. I want water, and—" "Shut up, fool." There was a sound as of fist meeting flesh. The shriek was stilled. "Plenty of water. Tanks full of the stuff." A grizzled miner turned to the self-appointed boss and twitched his head toward the laboring pump. "Too damn much water too soon, huh?" "I wouldn't wonder, but get busy." As his now orderly and purposeful men disappeared, Jones picked up his microphone and changed the setting of a dial. "On top, somebody," he said crisply. "On top." "Oh, there's somebody alive down in 12 after all," a girl's voice screamed in his ear. "Mr. Clancy! Mr. Edwards!" "To hell with Clancy, and Edwards too," Jones barked. "Gimme the chief engineer and the head surveyor, and gimme 'em fast." "Clancy speaking, Station 12. If Works Manager Clancy had heard that pointed remark, and he must have, he ignored it. "Stanley and Emerson will be here in a moment. In the meantime, who's calling? I don't recognize your voice, and it's been so long." "Jones, shift boss, Stope 59. I had a little trouble getting here to the station." "What? Where's Penwaye and Riley and—" "Dead, everybody. Gas or damp. No warning." "Not enough to turn on anything? Not even the purifiers?" "Nothing." "Where were you?" "Up in the Stope." "Good God!" That news to Clancy was informative enough. But to hell with all that. What happened and where? "A skip load, and then a magazine of high explosive right at Station 7. It's right at the main shaft, you know." Jones did not know, since he had never been in that part of the mine, but he could see the picture. Main shaft filled up to above 7, and both emergency shafts blocked. Number 1 at 6, number 2 at 7. Must have been a fault, but here's Chief Engineer Stanley. The works manager, not too unwillingly, relinquished the microphone. A miner came running up, and Jones covered his mouthpiece. "How about the glory holes?" "Plug solid, all 4 of 'em. By the vibro, clear up to 11. "Thanks." Then, as soon as Stanley's voice came on, "What I want to know is, why is this damned water pump overloading? What's the circuit?" "You must be—" "Yes, you are pumping against too much head. 5 levels above you are dead, you know, so—" "Dead? Can't you raise anybody?" "Not yet. So you're pumping through dead boosters on 11 and 10, and so on up, and when your overload relief valve opens—" "Relief valve!" Jones almost screamed. "Can I dog the damn thing down?" "No, it's internal." "Christ, what a design! I could eat a handful of iron filings and puke a better emergency pump than that." "When it opens," Stanley went stolidly on, "the water will go through the bypass back into the pump, so you better rod out one of the glory holes and—" "Get conscious, fathead!" Jones blazed. "What would we use for time? Get off the air. Give me Emerson." "Emerson speaking. Got your maps?" "Yes." "We got to run a seg up to 11, fast or drown. Can you give me the shortest possible distance?" "Can do." The head surveyor snapped orders. "We'll have it for you in a minute. Thank God there was somebody down there with a brain. It doesn't take superhuman intelligence to push buttons." "You'd be surprised. Your point on glory holes was very well taken. You won't have much time after the pump quits. When the water reaches the station—" "Curtains, and it's all done now, running free and easy, recirculating. Hurry that dope." "Here it is now. Start at the highest point of Stope 59. Repeat, Stope 59. Jones waved a furious hand as he shouted the words. The tight-packed miners turned and ran. The shift boss followed them, carrying the walkie-talkie, aiming an exasperated kick of pure frustration at the merrily humming water pump as he passed it. 32 degrees from vertical, anywhere between 30 and 35. 30 to 35 off vertical. Direction, got a compass? Yes. Set the blue on 0, course 275 degrees. Blue on 0, course 275. Deck 69.20 feet. That'll put you into 11's class yard, so big you can't miss it. Distance 69.2. That all? Fine. Maybe we'll make it after all. They're sinking a shaft, of course. From where? About 4 miles in on 6. It'll take time. If we can get up to 11, we'll have all the time on the clock. It'll take a week or more to flood 12 stopes. But this sag is sure as hell going to be touch and go. And say, from the throw of the pump and the volume of the sump, will you give me the best estimate you can of how much time we've got? I want at least an hour, but I'm afraid I won't have it. Yes, I'll call you back. The shift boss elbowed his way through the throng of men and, dragging the radio behind him, wriggled and floated up the rise. Right, he bellowed, the echoes resounding deafeningly all up and down the narrow tube. You up there ahead of me? Yeah, that worthy bellowed back. More men left than I thought. How many? Half of 'em? Just about. Good. Sort out the ones you got up there by trades. Then, when he had emerged into the now brilliantly illuminated stope, where are the timber pimps? Over there. Rustle timbers. Whatever you can find, and wherever you can find it, grab it and bring it up here. Get some 12-inch steel, too, 6 feet long. Timberman, grab that stuff off the face and start your staging right here. You muckers, rig a couple of scoffers to throw muck to bury the base and checker work up to the hanging wall. Doze a sluice way down into that waste pocket there, so we won't clog ourselves up. Work fast, fellows, but make it solid. You know the load it'll have to carry and what will happen if it gives. They knew. They knew what they had to do and did it, furiously but with care and precision. How wide a sag you figuring on, Soup? The boss timberman asked. 8-foot checker work to the hanging anyway, huh? Yes, I'll let you know in a minute. The surveyor came in. 41 minutes is my best guess. From when? From the time the pump failed. That was 4 minutes ago, nearer 5, and 5 more before we can start cutting. 41 less 10 is 31. 31 into 69.2 goes 2.23 feet per minute, my slipstick says. Thanks. Right. What would you say is the biggest sag we can cut in this kind of rock at 2 1/4 feet a minute? The miner scratched his whiskery chin. That's a tough one, boss. You'll have to figure damn close to 100 pounds of air to the foot on plain cutting. That's 200 1/4. But without a burley to pimp for her, a rotary can't take that kind of air. She'll foul herself to a standstill before she cuts a foot. And with a burley riggin', she's got to make damn near a double cut. 7 foot inside, figure. So, any way you look at it, you ain't going to cut no 2 foot to the minute. I was hoping you wouldn't check my figures, but you do. So, we'll cut 5 feet. Saw your timbers accordingly. We'll hold that burley by hand. Wright shook his head dubiously. We don't want to die down here any more than you do, boss, so we'll do our damnedest. But how in hell do you figure you can hold her to her work? Rig a yoke. Cut a stretcher up for canvas and padding. It'll pound, but a man can stand almost anything in short enough shifts, if he's got to or die. And for a time, 2 minutes to be exact, during which the rotary chewed up and spat out a plug of rock over 5 feet deep, things went very well indeed. 2 men, instead of the usual 3, could run the rotary. That is, they could tend the complicated pneumatic walking jacks, which not only oscillated the cutting demon in a geometrical path, but also rammed it against the face with a steadily held and enormous pressure, even while climbing almost vertically upward under a burden of over 20,000 pounds. An armored hand waved a signal. Voice was utterly useless. Up. A valve was flipped. A huge, flat steel foot arose. A timber slid into place, creaking and groaning as that big flat foot smashed down. Up again. Up a third time. 18 seconds. Less than 1/3 of a minute. 10 inches gained. And while it was not easy, 2 men could hold the burley in 1-minute shifts. As has been intimated, this machine pimped for the rotary. It waited on it, ministering to its every need with a singleness of purpose impossible to any except robotic devotion. It picked the rotary's teeth, it freed its linkages, it deloused its ports, it cleared its spillways of compacted debris. It even, and this is a feat starkly unbelievable to anyone who does not know the hardness of neocarb alloy and the tensile strength of ultra-special steels, it even changed, while in full operation, the rotary's diamond-tipped cutters. Both Burley and Rotary were extremely efficient, but neither was either quiet or gentle. In their quietest moments they shrieked and groaned and yelled, producing a volume of sound in which nothing softer than a cannon shot could have been heard. But when, in changing the rotary's cutting teeth, the Burley's fingers were driven into and through the solid rock, a matter of merest routine to both machines, the resultant blast of sound cannot even be imagined, to say nothing of being described. And always both machines spewed out torrents of rock, in sizes ranging from impalpable dust up to chunks as big as a fist. As the sag lengthened and the checkerwork grew higher, the work began to slow down. They began to lose the time they had gained. There were plenty of men, but in that narrow bore there simply was not room for enough men to work. Even through that storm of dust and hurtling rock, the timbermen could get their blocking up there, but they could not place it fast enough. There were too many other men in the way. One of them had to get out. Since one man could not possibly run the rotary, one man would have to hold the Burley. They tried it, one after another. No soap. It hammered them flat. The rotary, fouled in every tooth and channel and vent under the terrific thrust of 230 pounds of air, nearly gnawed and slid. The timbermen now had room, but nothing to do. And Jones, who had been biting at his mustache and ignoring the frantic walkie-talkie for minutes, stared grimly at watch and tape. 3 minutes left and over 8 feet to go. "Give me that armor," he rasped, and climbed the blocks. "Open the air wide open. Give her the whole 250. Get down, Mac. I'll take her the rest of the way." He put his shoulders to the improvised yoke, braced his feet, and heaved. The Burley, screaming and yelling and clamoring, went joyously to work, both ways. God, what punishment! The rotary, free and clear, chewed rock more viciously than ever. An armored hand smote his leg. "Lift!" He lifted that foot, set it down 2 inches higher. The other one, 4 inches, 6, 1 foot, 2, 3. Lord of ancients, was this lifetime of agony only 1 minute? Or wasn't he holding her? Had the damn thing stopped cutting? No, it was still cutting. The rocks were banging against and bouncing off his helmet as viciously and as numerously as ever. He could sense, rather than feel, the furious fashion in which the relays of timbermen were laboring to keep those high-stepping jacks in motion. No, it had been only 1 minute. Twice that long yet to go. God, nothing could be that brutal. A bull elephant couldn't take it. But by all the gods of space and all the devils in hell, he'd stay with it until that sag broke through. And grimly, doggedly, toward the end, 9/10 unconsciously, Lensman Conway Costigan stayed with it. And in the stope so far below, a new and highly authoritative voice blared from the speaker. "Jones! God damn it, Jones, answer me! If Jones isn't there, somebody else answer me! Anybody!" "Yes, sir?" Wright was afraid to answer that peremptory call, but more afraid not to. "Jones, this is Clancy." "No, sir, not Jones. Wright, sir. Top miner." "Where's Jones?" "Up in the sag, sir. He's holding the Burley, alone." "Alone? Hell's purple fires! Tell him to— How many men has he got on the rotary?" "2, sir. That's all they's got room for." "Tell him to quit it. Put somebody else on it. I won't have him killed, damn it." "He's the only one strong enough to hold it, sir, but I'll send up word." Word went up via sign language and came back down. "Begging your pardon, sir, but he says to tell you to go to hell, sir. He won't have no time for chit-chat, he says, until this goddamn sag is through or the juice goes off, sir." A blast of profanity erupted from the speaker, of such violence that the thoroughly scared Wright threw the walkie-talkie down the waste chute, and in the same instant the rotary crashed through. Dazed, groggy, barely conscious from his terrific effort, Jones stared owlishly through the heavy, steel-braced lenses of his helmet, while the timberman set a few more courses of wood and the rotary walked itself and the clinging Burley up and out of the hole. He climbed stiffly out, and as he stared at the pillar of light flaring upward from the sag, his gorge began to rise. "Where's the idea of that damn surveyor lying to us like that?" he babbled. "We had oodles and oodles of time. Didn't have to kill ourselves. Damn water ain't got there yet. Was the big—" He wobbled weakly and took one short step, and the lights went out. The surveyor's estimate had been impossibly, accidentally close. They had had a little extra time, but it was measured very easily in seconds. And Jones, logical to the end in a queerly addled way, stood in the almost palpable darkness and wobbled and thought. If a man couldn't see anything with his eyes wide open, he was either blind or unconscious. He wasn't blind, therefore he must be unconscious and not know it. He sighed wearily and gratefully and collapsed. Battery lights were soon reconnected, and everybody knew that they had holed through. There was no more panic, and even before the shift boss had recovered full consciousness, he was walking down the drift toward Station 11. There is no need to enlarge upon the rest of that grim and grisly affair. Level after level was activated, and, since working upward in mines is vastly faster than working downward, the two parties met on the 8th level. Half of the men who would otherwise have died were saved, and, much more important from the viewpoint of Uranium Inc., the deeper and richer half of the biggest and richest uranium mine in existence, instead of being out of production for a year or more, would be back in full operation in a couple of weeks. And George Washington Jones, still a trifle shaky from his ordeal, was called into the front office. But before he arrived, "I'm going to make him assistant works manager," Clancy announced. "I think not." "But listen, Mr. Isaacson, please. How do you expect me to build up a staff if you snatch every good man I find away from me?" "You didn't find him. Birkenfeld did. He was here only on a test. He is going into Department Q." Clancy, who had opened his mouth to continue his protests, shut it wordlessly. He knew that Department Q was Department Q. Chapter 15. Costigan was not surprised to see the man he had known as Birkenfeld in Uranium's ornate conference room. He had not expected, however, to see Isaacson. He knew, of course, that Spaceways owned Uranium Inc. and the planet Eridan, lock, stock, and barrel, but it never entered his modest mind that his case would be of sufficient importance to warrant the personal attention of the big noise himself. Hence, the sight of that suave and unrevealing face gave the putative Jones a more than temporary qualm. Isaacson was top-bracket stuff, way out of his class. Virgil Samms ought to be taking this assignment, but since he wasn't... But instead of being an inquisition, the meeting was friendly and informal from the start. They complimented him upon the soundness of his judgment and the accuracy of his decisions. They thanked him, both with words and with a considerable sum of expendable credits. They encouraged him to talk about himself, but there was nothing whatever of the star chamber or of cross-examination. The last question was representative of the whole conference. "One other thing, Jones, has me slightly baffled," Isaacson said with a really winning smile. "Since you do not drink, and since you are not in search of feminine, companionship, just why did you go down to Roaring Jack's dive?" "Two reasons," Jones said, with a somewhat shamefaced grin. "The minor one isn't easy to explain, but, well, I hadn't been having an exactly easy time of it on Earth. You all know about that, I suppose?" They knew. "Well, I was taking a very dim view of things in general, and a good fight would get it out of my system. It always does." "I see. And the major reason?" "I knew, of course, that I was on probation. I would have to get promoted and fast or stay sunk forever. To get promoted fast, a man can either be enough of a bootlicker to be pulled up from on high, or he can be shoved up by the men he is working with. The best way to get a crowd of hard rock men to like you is to lick a few of 'em. Off hours, of course, and according to Hoyle, and the more of 'em you can lick at once, the better. I'm pretty good at rough-and-tumble brawling, so I gambled that the cops would step in before I got banged up too much. I won." "I see," Isaacson said again, in an entirely different tone. He did see now. "The first technique is so universally used that the possibility of the second did not occur to me. Nice work. Very nice." He turned to the other members of the board. "This, I believe, concludes the business of the meeting?" For some reason or other, Isaacson nodded slightly as he asked the question, and one by one, as though in concurrence, the others nodded in reply. The meeting broke up. Outside the door, however, the magnate did not go about his own business, nor send Jones about his. Instead, "I would like to show you, if I may, the above-ground part of our works." "My time is yours, sir. I am interested." It is unnecessary here to go into the details of a civilization's greatest uranium operation. The storage bins, the grinders, the Wilfley tables and slime tanks, the flotation sluices, the roasters and reducers, the processes of solution and crystallization and recrystallization, of final oxidation and reduction. Suffice it to say that Isaacson showed Jones the whole immensity of Uranium Works No. 1. The trip ended on the top floor of the towering administration building, in a heavily screened room containing a desk, a couple of chairs, and a tremendously massive safe. "Smoke up." Isaacson indicated a package of Jones' favorite brand of cigarettes and lighted a cigar. "You knew that you were under a test. I wonder, though, if you knew how much of it was testing." "All of it," Jones grinned. "Except for the big blow, of course." "Of course." "There were too many possibilities, of too many different kinds, to pat. I might warn you, though, I could have got away clear with that $500,000. The possibility existed. Surprisingly, Isaacson did not tell him that the trap was more subtle than it had appeared to be. It was, however, worth the risk. "Why didn't you?" "Because I figure on making more than that a little later, and I might live longer to spend it." "Sound thinking, my boy. Really sound. Now, you noticed, of course, the vote at the end of the meeting?" Jones had noticed it, and although he did not say so, he had been wondering about it ever since. The older man strolled over to the safe and opened it, revealing a single, startlingly small package. "You passed, unanimously. You are now learning what you have to know. Now that we trust you unreservedly, you will be watched for a long time, and before you can make one false step, you will die." "That would seem to be good business, sir." "Glad you look at it that way. We thought you would. You saw the works. Quite an operation, don't you think?" "Immense, sir. The biggest thing I ever saw." "What would you say, then, to the idea of this office being our real headquarters, of that little package there being our real business?" He swung the safe door shut, spun the knob. "It would have been highly surprising a couple of hours ago." Costigan could not afford to appear stupid, nor to possess too much knowledge. He had to steer an extremely difficult middle course. "After the climax of this build-up, though, it wouldn't seem at all impossible. Or that there were wheels, plenty of 'em, within wheels." "Smart," Isaacson applauded. "And what would you think might be in that package? This room is ray-proof." "Against anything the Galactic Patrol can swing?" "Positively." "Well, then, it might be something beginning with the letter—" He flicked 2 fingers almost invisibly fast into a T and went on without a break, M as in morphine. "Your caution and restraint are commendable. If I had any remaining doubt as to your ability, it is gone." He paused, frowning. As belief in ability increased, that in sincerity lessened. This doubt, this questioning, existed every time a new executive was initiated into the mysteries of Department Q. The board's judgment was good. They had slipped only twice, and those two errors had been corrected easily enough. The fellow had been warned once. That was enough. He took the plunge. You will work with the assistant works manager here until you understand the duties of the position. You will be transferred to Tellus as assistant works manager there. Your principal duties will, however, be concerned with Department Q, which you will head up one day if you make good. And, just incidentally, when you go to Tellus, a package like that one in the safe will go with you. Oh, I see. I'll make good, sir. Jones let Isaacson see his jaw muscles tighten in resolve. It may take a little time for me to learn my way around, sir, but I'll learn it. I'm sure you will. And now, to go into greater detail. Virgil Samms had to be sure of his facts. More than that, he had to be able to prove them, not merely to the satisfaction of a law enforcement officer, but beyond any reasonable doubt of the hardest-headed member of a cynical and skeptical jury. Wherefore, Jack Kinnison and Mace Northrop took up the Thionite Trail at the exact point where, each trip, George Olmsted had had to abandon it, in the atmosphere of Covenda. And, fortunately, not too much preparation was required. Covenda was, as has been intimated, a primitive world. Its native people, humanoid in type, had developed a culture approximating in some respects that of the North American Indian at about the time of Columbus, in others that of the ancient nomads of Araby. Thus a couple of wandering natives, unrecognizable under their dirty, storm-proof blankets and their scarcely thinner layers of grease and grime, watched impassively, incuriously, while a box floated pendant from its parachute from sky to ground. Mounted upon their uncouth steeds, they followed that box when it was hauled to the white man's village. Unlike many of the other natives, these two did not shuffle into that village, to lean silently against a rock or a wall, awaiting their turns to exchange a few hours of simple labor for a container of a new and highly potent beverage. They did, however, keep themselves constantly and minutely informed as to everything these strange, devil-ridden white men did. One of these pseudo-natives wandered off into the wilderness 2 or 3 days before the huge thing which flies without wings left ground, the other immediately afterward. Thus the departure of the spaceship from Covenda was recorded, as was its arrival at Eridan. It had been extremely difficult for the patrol's engineers to devise ways and means of tracing that ship from departure to arrival without exciting suspicion, but it had not proved impossible. And Jack Kinnison, lounging idly and elegantly in the concourse of Dinopolis Spaceport, seethed imperceptibly. Having swallowed a tiny service special capsule that morning, he knew that he had been under continuous spy ray inspection for over 2 hours. He had not given himself away. Practically everybody screened their inside coat pockets and hip pockets, and the cat whisker lead from lens to leg simply could not be seen. But for all the good they were doing him, his ultra instruments might just as well have been back on Tellus. "Mace," he sent, with no change whatever in the vapid expression then on his face. "I'm still covered. Are you?" "Covered." The answering thought was a snort. "They're covering me like water covers a submarine." "Keep tuned. I'll call Spud." "Spud!" "Come in, Jack." Conway Costigan, alone now in the sanctum of Department Q, did not seem to be busy, but he was. "That red herring they told us to drag across the trail was too damned red. They must be touchier than fulminate to spy work on their armed forces. Neither Mace nor I can do a lick of work. Anybody else covered?" "No, all clear." "Good. Tell them the Zwilnik blockers took us out." "I'll do that. Distance only, or is somebody on your tail?" "Somebody, and I mean somebody. A slick chick with a classy chassis. A blonde with great big come-hither eyes. Too good to be true, especially the falsies. Wiring, my friend. And I haven't been able to get a close look, but I wouldn't wonder if her nostrils had a skillionth of a millimeter too much expansion. I want a spy ray up. Is it safe to use, Fred?" Kinnison referred to the grizzled engineer now puttering about in a certain spaceship, not the one in which he and Northrop had come to Eridan. "Definitely not. I can do it myself and still stay very much in character. No, I don't know her. Not surprising, of course, since the policy here is never to let the right hand know what the left is doing. How about you, Mace? Have you got a little girlfriend, too?" "Yea, verily, brother, but not little. More my size." Northrop pointed out a tall, trim brunette, strolling along with the effortless, consciously unconscious poise of the professional model. I don't know her either," Costigan reported. "But both of them are wearing 4-inch spy ray blocks and are probably wired up like Christmas trees. By inference, P-gun proof. I can't penetrate, of course, but maybe I can get a viewpoint. You're right, Jack. Nostrils plugged. Anti-thionite, anti-V2, anti-everything. In fact, anti-social. I'll spread their pictures around and see if anybody knows either of them." He did so, and over 100 of the patrol's shrewdest operatives. Upon this occasion, North America had invaded Eridan in force, studied and thought. No one knew the tall brunette, but "I know the blonde." This was Parker of Washington, a service ace for 25 years. "Hellcat Hazel. D-Force, the hardest-boiled babe unhung. Watch your step around her. She's just as handy with a knife and knockout drops as she is with a gun." "Thanks, Parker. I've heard of her." Costigan was thinking fast. "Freelance. No way of telling who she's working for at the moment." This was a statement, not a question. "Only that it would have to be somebody with a lot of money. Her price is high. That all?" "That's all, fellows." Then to Jack and Northrop. "My thought is that you two guys are completely outclassed, outweighed, outnumbered, outmanned, and outgunned. Undressed, you're sitting ducks, and if you put out any screens, it'll crystallize their suspicions and they'll grab you right then, or maybe even knock you off. You'd better get out of here at full blast. You can't do any more good here, the way things are." "Sure we can," Kinnison protested. "You wanted a diversion, didn't you?" "Yes, but what we've done already isn't a patch to what we can do next. We can set up such a diversion that the boys can walk right on the thionite carrier's heels without anybody paying any attention. By the way, you don't know yet who is going to carry it, do you?" "No, no penetration at all." "You soon will, bucko. Watch our smoke." "What do you think you're going to do?" Costigan demanded sharply. "This," Jack explained. "And don't try to say no. We're on our own, you know." "Well, it sounds good, and if you can pull it off, it will help no end. Go ahead." The demurely luscious blonde stared disconsolately at the bulletin board, upon which another 30 minutes was being added to the time of arrival of a ship already 3 hours late. She picked up a book, glanced at its cover, put it down. Her hand moved toward a magazine, drew back, dropped idly into her lap. She sighed, stifled a yawn prettily, leaned backward in her seat. In such a position, Jack noticed that he could not see into her nostrils, and closed her eyes. And Jack Kinnison, coming visibly to a decision, sat down beside her. "Pardon me, miss, but I feel just like you look. Can you tell me why convention decrees that 2 people, stuck in this concourse by arrivals that nobody knows when will arrive, have got to suffer alone when they could have so much more fun suffering together?" The girl's eyes opened slowly. She was neither startled nor afraid, nor, it seemed, even interested. In fact, she gazed at him with so much disinterest, and for so long a time, that he began to wonder, was she going to play sweet and innocent to the end? "Yes, conventions are stupid sometimes," she admitted finally, her lovely lips curving into the beginnings of a smile. Her voice, low and sweet, matched perfectly the rest of her charming self. "After all, perfectly nice people do meet informally on shipboard. Why not in concourses?" Why not, indeed? And I'm perfectly nice people, I assure you. Willie Borden is the name. My friends call me Bill. And you? Beatrice Bailey. B for short. Tell me what you like, and we'll talk about it. Why talk when we could be eating? I'm with a guy. He's out on the field somewhere, a big bruiser with a pencil-striped black mustache. Maybe you saw him talking to me a while back. I think so, now that you mention him. Too big, much too big. The girl spoke carelessly, but managed to make it very clear that Jack Kinnison was just exactly the right size. Why? I told him I'd have supper with him. Shall we hunt him up and eat together? Why not? Is he alone? He was when I saw him last. Although Jack knew exactly where Northrop was and who was with him, he had to play safe. He did not know how much this B. Bailey really knew. He knows a lot more people around here than I do, though, so maybe he isn't now. Let me carry some of that plunder. You might carry those books, thanks, but the field is so big. How do you expect to find him? Or do you know where he is? He denied vigorously. This was the critical moment. She certainly wasn't suspicious, yet, but she was showing signs of not wanting to go out there, and if she refused to go... To be honest, I don't care whether I find him or not. The idea of ditching him appeals to me more and more. So how about this? We'll dash out to the third dock, just so I won't have to actually lie about looking for him, and dash right back here. Or wouldn't you rather have it a twosome? I refused to answer, by advice of counsel. The girl laughed gaily, but her answer was plain enough. The rate of progress was by no means a dash, and Kinnison did not look, with his eyes, for Northrop. Nevertheless, just south of the third dock, the two couples met. My cousin, Grace James, Northrop said, without a tremor or a quiver. Wild Willie Borden, Grace, usually called Baldy on account of his hair. The girls were introduced, each vouchsafing the other a completely meaningless smile and a colorlessly conventional word of greeting. Were they, in fact, as in seeming, total strangers, or were they, in fact, working together as closely as were the two young Lensmen themselves? If that was acting, it was a beautiful job. Neither man could detect the slightest flaw in the performance of either girl. Whither away, pilot? Jack allowed no lapse of time. You know all the places around here. Lead us to a good one. This way, my old and fragrant fruit. Northrop led off with a flourish, and again Jack tensed. The walk led straight past the third-class, apparently deserted dock of which a certain ultra-fast vessel was the only occupant. If nothing happened for 15 more seconds, nothing did. The laughing, chattering four came abreast of the portal. The door swung open, and the Lensman went into action. They did not like to strong-arm women, but speed was their first consideration, with safety a close second, and it is impossible for a man to make speed while carrying a conscious, lithe, strong, heavily armed woman in such a position that she cannot use fists, feet, teeth, gun, or knife. An unconscious woman, on the other hand, can be carried easily and safely enough. Therefore, Jack spun his partner around, forced both of her hands into one of his. The free hand flashed upward toward the neck. A hard finger pressed unerringly against a nerve. The girl went limp. The two victims were hustled aboard, and the spaceship, surrounded now by full-coverage screen, took off. Kinnison paid no attention to ship or course. Orders had been given long since and would be carried out. Instead, he lowered his burden to the floor, spread her out flat, and sought out and removed item after item of wiring, apparatus, and offensive and defensive armament. He did not undress her, quite, but he made completely certain that the only weapons left to the young lady were those with which nature had endowed her. And Northrop, having taken care of his alleged cousin with equal thoroughness, the small arms were sent out, and both doors of the room were securely locked. "Now, Hellcat Hazel DeForce," Kinnison said conversationally, "you can snap out of it any time. You've been back to normal for at least 2 minutes. You've found out that your famous sex appeal won't work. There's nothing loose you can grab, and you're too smart an operator to tackle me bare-handed. Who's the captain of your team, you or the clothes horse?" "Clothes horse!" the statuesque brunette exclaimed, but her protests were drowned out. The blonde could, and did, talk louder, faster, and rougher. "Do you think you can get away with this?" she demanded. "Why, you—" And the unexpurgated, trenchant, brilliantly detailed characterization would have seared its way through 4-ply asbestos. "And just what do you think you're going to do with me?" "As to the first, I think so," Kinnison replied, ignoring the deep space verbiage. "As to the second, as of now, I don't know. What would you do if our situations were reversed?" "I'd blast you to a cinder, or else take a knife and—" "Hazel!" the brunette cautioned sharply. "Careful! You'll touch them off, and they'll—" "Shut up, Jane. They won't hurt us any more than they have already. It's psychologically impossible. Isn't that true, Copper?" Hazel lighted a cigarette, inhaled deeply, and blew a cloud of smoke at Kinnison's face. "Pretty much so, I guess," the lensman admitted, frankly enough. "But we can put you away for the rest of your lives." "Space happy? Or do you think I am?" she sneered. "What would you use for a case? We're as safe as if we were in God's pocket. And besides, our positions will be reversed pretty quick. You may not know it, but the fastest ships in space are chasing us right now." "For once, you're wrong. We've got plenty of legs ourselves, and we're blasting for rendezvous with a task force. But enough of this chatter. I want to know what job you're on and why you picked on us. Give." "Oh, does-oo," Hazel cooed venomously. "Come and sit on Mama's lap, itty-bitty soldier boy, and she'll tell you everything you want to know." Both lensmen probed then, with everything they had, but learned nothing of value. The women did not know what the patrolmen were trying to do, but they were so intensely hostile that their mental blocks, unconscious although they were as effective as full-driven thought screens against the most insidious approaches the men could make. "Anything in their handbags, Mace?" Jack asked finally. "I'll look. Nothing much. Just this." And the very tonelessness of Northrop's voice made Jack look up quickly. "Just a letter from the boyfriend." Hazel shrugged her shoulders. "Nothing hot, not even warm. Go ahead and read it." "Not interested in what it says, but it might be smart to develop it, envelope and all, for invisible ink and whatnot." He did so, deeming it a worthwhile expenditure of time. He already knew what the hidden message was, but no one not of the patrol should know that no transmission of intelligence, however coded or garbled or disguised or by whatever means sent, could be concealed from any wearer of Arisia's lens. "Listen, Hazel," Kinnison said, holding up the now slightly stained paper. 362. That's you, I suppose, and you're the squad leader. Men mentioned previously being investigated. Stop. Assign 398. That must be you, Jane. And make acquaintance. Stop. If no further instructions received by 1800 hours, liquidate immediately. Stop. Party 1. The blonde operative lost for the first time her brazen control. "Why, that code is unbreakable," she gasped. "Wrong again, gentle Ellis. Some of us are specialists." He directed a thought at Northrop. "This changes things slightly, Mace. I was going to turn them loose, but now I don't know. Better we take it up with the boss, don't you think?" "Positively." Samms was called and considered the matter for approximately 1 minute. "Your first idea was right, Jack. Let them go. The message may be helpful and informative, but the women would not. They know nothing. Congratulations, boys, on the complete success of Operation Red Herring." "Ouch," Jack grimaced mentally to his partner after the first lensman had cut off. "They know enough to be in on bumping you and me off, but that ain't important," says he. "And it ain't, bub," Northrop grinned back. "Moderately so, maybe, if they had got us, but not at all so now they can't. The Lensmen have landed, and the situation is well in hand. It is written. Salah. Check. Let's wrap it up. Jack turned to the blonde. Come on, Hazel. Out. Number 4 lifeboat. Do you want to come peaceably, or shall I work on your neck again? You could think of other places that would be more fun. She got up and stared directly into his eyes, her lip curling. That is, if you were a man instead of a sublimated Boy Scout. Kinnison, without a word, wheeled and unlocked the door. Hazel swaggered forward, but the taller girl hung back. Are you sure there's air, and they'll pick us up? Maybe they're going to make us breathe space. Huh? They haven't got the guts, Hazel sneered. Come on, Jane. Number 4, you said, darling? She led the way. Kinnison opened the portal. Jane hurried aboard, but Hazel paused and held out her arms. Aren't you even going to kiss Mama goodbye, baby boy? She taunted. Better not waste much more time. We blow this boat, sealed or open, in 15 seconds. By what effort Kinnison held his voice level and expressionless, he hoped the wench would never know. She looked at him, started to say something, looked again. She had gone just about as far as it was safe to go. She stepped into the boat and reached for the lever, and as the valve was swinging smoothly shut, the men heard a tinkling laugh, reminiscent of icicles breaking against steel bells. Hell's brazen hinges! Kinnison wiped his forehead as the lifeboat shot away. Hazel was something brand new to him, a phenomenon with which none of his education, training, or experience had equipped him to cope. I've heard about the guy who got hold of a tiger by the tail, but... His thought expired on a wondering, confused note. Yeah, Northrop was in no better case. We won, technically, I guess. Or did we? That was a god-awful drubbing we took, mister. Well, we got away alive anyway. We'll tell Parker his dope is correct to the proverbial 20 decimals. And now that we've escaped, let's call Spud and see how things came out. And Costigan Jones assured them that everything had come out very well indeed. The shipment of thionite had been followed without any difficulty at all, from the spaceship clear through to Jones' own office, and it exposed now in Department Q's own safe, under Jones' personal watch and ward. The pressure had lightened tremendously, just as Kinnison and Northrop had thought it would, when they set up their diversion. Costigan listened impassively to the whole story. Now, should I have shot her or not? Jack demanded. Not whether I could have or not. I couldn't. But should I have, Spud? I don't know, Costigan thought for minutes. I don't think so. No, not in cold blood. I couldn't have either, and wouldn't if I could. It wouldn't be worth it. Somebody will shoot her some day, but not one of us, unless, of course, it's in a fight. Thanks, Bud. That makes me feel better. Off. Costigan Jones' desk was already clear, since there was little or no paperwork connected with his position in Department Q. Hence his preparations for departure were few and simple. He merely opened the safe, stuck the package into his pocket, closed and locked the safe, and took a company ground car to the spaceport. Nor was there any more formality about his leaving the planet. Aridian had, of course, a customs frontier of sorts, but since Uranium Inc. owned Aridian in fee simple, its customs paid no attention whatever to company ships or to low-number, gold-badge company men. Nor did Jones need ticket, passport, or visa. Company men rode company ships to and from company plants, wherever situated, without let or hindrance. Thus, wearing the aura of power of his new position, and gold badge number 38, George W. Jones was whisked out to the uranium ship and was shown to his cabin. Nor was it surprising that the trip from Aridian to Earth was completely without incident. This was an ordinary freighter, hauling uranium on a routine flight. Her cargo was valuable, of course, the sine qua non of interstellar trade, but in no sense precious. Not pirate bait by any means. And only 2 men knew that this flight was in any whit different from the one which had preceded it or the one which would follow it. If this ship was escorted or guarded, the fact was not apparent, and no patrol vessel came nearer to it than 4 detets. Virgil Samms and Roderick Kinnison saw to that. The voyage, however, was not tedious. Jones was busy every minute. In fact, there were scarcely minutes enough in which to assimilate the material which Isaacson had given him, the layouts, flow sheets, and organization charts of Works Number 18 on Tellus. And upon arrival at the private spaceport, which was an integral part of Works Number 18, Jones was not surprised. He knew more now than he had known a few weeks before, and infinitely more than the man on the street, to learn that the customs men of this particular North American port of entry were just as complacent as were those of Aridin. They did not bother even to count the boxes, to say nothing of inspecting them. They stamped the ship's papers without either reading or checking them. They made a perfunctory search, it is true, of crewmen and quarters, but a low number of gold badge was still a magic talisman. Unquestioned, sacrosanct, he and his baggage were escorted to the ground car first in line. "Administration building," Jones Costigan told the hacker, and that was that.